And we are live on Oz Property Investor. We bring the big names and we bring the big development fun this week. How you going, Dan? What's happening? Daniel He. Oh, Dan.
Everything at the moment, everything, including presenting with you guys. I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, I feel like I hit you there with a whole bunch of noise. I do that, people. They get it. Yeah, they're great to hear. How you going, Joe? What's happening?
Mate, I'm fantastic. I love talking property development. I think a lot of people are going to get value out of this one. It's property development is one of those things that I feel like a lot of people are scared of, and because it's the fear of the unknown. They don't know what they don't know. And I guess you don't hear about how many people mess up development, because then you've got those people that are, I forgot what it's called, but like where they just jump straight in. They go head first without getting educated first and listening to the smart people. So I feel like there's people that have no idea that just jump straight in, but then people that are scared, they don't know what the process is. And we're going to do a whole heap of deep diving onto what that process is, how to find, what's the title is, how to find
your next development deal.
Your next development, because you don't need to have everything. You don't need to have the deal. You don't need to have the money, and you don't need to have the skill all the time. You can find people to help you do those things. But how are you, Jeff? How are you? More important.
Yeah, I feel busy. I'm looking forward to a little bit of a break over Easter and then sort of, yeah, but no, feeling really good. And RBA paused the cash rate yesterday to much consternation to the group. I saw posts and people, it really gets people fired up these days. Like, it's just amazing how many people there's so much emotion around it. It's just the concept of money, which I'm sure.
How do you think about this interest rate pause, Daniel? What are your thoughts to it?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, we've had the highest rate of hikes in a long time, if not the highest rate of hikes. And I think a lot of people are looking for a bit of a breather. And I think, some of that is driven by what's happening overseas, banks in the US, for example. But I think it's good that it's hit a pause. The question is, where are we going to be at the end of the year? Are we going to start cutting rates? Are we going to still be at these rates that we are now? And I think it's really that uncertainty for a lot of people. But in terms of property development, people are still out there doing fantastic deals, right? Irrespective of where interest rates sit. So, so it's a bit of a mixed bag depending on which seat and which angle you're looking at it from.
Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah, it's very topical at the moment. So for those that have tuned in, please drop a comment, drop a like, do all that good stuff, and ask your questions about anything you wanted to know about property development, because we have a person, Dan, and I'll give an intro, but it's he's done over $40 million worth of being involved in that, and is an active property developer as well. So if that's not enough knowledge and experience, then I think, it's great to have you on. So should we pump into the quote of the week? Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, this is what I like about getting people that are at that next level, because you can talk to the basic stuff, but you can also help the more advanced person, unpack what they're looking to do as well. Like, what are those couple of 1%ers that are going to allow me to get to that next level? So if anyone is a brand new investor, if anyone is a more advanced investor and like, oh, I don't know about X, pop it in the comments and we'll jump to them and hopefully Dan can answer these ones. But yes, let's get to the quote of the week. Dan, what is your quote of the week if you have one preloaded? We always do this to the poor guest where we're like, hey, by the way, what's your quote of the week 5 minutes before we go live? And it may not be loaded. But what have you got, mate?
If it's okay, it's a question. And the question is, who's doing your due diligence? And that will hopefully have more meaning by the end of the presentation, hopefully. But yeah, who is doing your due diligence?
That is a good question. That is a very good question to ask. And if that person is you, are you qualified enough to do it? Do you know what you're actually looking into? What about you, Jeff?
By the end of this session, we hope to give you some answers. So mine, I thought I'd go with, because we had the developer's code, I thought it made sense to go on brand, on theme. We have Leonardo da Vinci. And so knowing is not enough. We must apply. So that dovetails quite nicely into your thing at the start, Joe. It's about the enthusiastic amateurs who get into something and just don't realize the risk that they're taking. But then there's also the other end of the spectrum, that those people that they have all the knowledge. They've gone to all the seminars, all the webinars and all that sort of stuff, but they still haven't found their first deal, or they've done one and they just haven't taken it to the next level. So I think that's kind of where I was pitching that quote to say, yes, knowledge is important, but you need to also take action. So I think my quotes are very similar most weeks, but yeah.
I love it. A great question that's come up that I'm sure we're going to talk about. Seed capital is always needed. How do you finance? So awesome. Okay.
Steve, stay tuned. Hold on to your seats. We will get into that. What is your quote of the week, Joe?
My quote of the week is this is it. Experience taught me a few things. One is to listen to your gut, no matter how good something sounds on paper. The second is that you're generally better off sticking to what you know. And the third is that sometimes your investments, the best investments, are the ones you don't make. Three very good quotes from Donald Trump. Yeah, I feel like
that GPT, then, Joe. How did you get
very sage advice from a very interesting man, but a man that has built billions of dollars in property development. So he's got some good stuff. But I do like that one. Listen to your gut. There are situations and times where you look at a deal and it's like, this makes sense on paper, but you just know something is wrong with it. But as long as you actually know and have done the research, don't just say, oh, I don't like this one because it's got, pigeons flying over the top of it. Yeah, I like it. Listen to your gut. Are we done with quote of the week?
We are, but before we get into the sponsor, I'll give a bit of an overview for those who may not know. So we're going to talk to Dan's sort of first purchase and property journey, which has some really great insights. And then we're going to talk to due diligence and 5 key aspects of that. Then we're going to look at strategies on how to fund your development. So we're going to talk about how to find them and then how to fund them. So did I miss anything, Joe or Dan? What are we? No,
I think you nailed it, mate. Summed up perfectly.
Let's go.
This live session is sponsored by Scott Agate from Hello House. Scott has created the world's first property negotiation as a service business. So what does that mean? Well, let's think about it. When was the last time you negotiated on anything over $100, let alone a property that is going to be one of the biggest investments of your life? The vendor, they have a trained negotiator on their side in the form of a real estate agent. That's kind of like you stepping into the ring with Mike Tyson after never training a day of boxing in your life. These guys are trained professionals, and that's what they do day in and day out. And this is what Hello House does every single day as well. They negotiate on property to get the best buy price from the real estate agents. Scott Agate, he's the expert negotiator. He has been in this industry since 1995. He owned and operated 3 Bell franchises. Scott was the guy that was teaching these real estate agents all these agent games. He knows all of their tricks. Having him on your side is going to give you a massive unfair advantage and literally save you tens of thousands of dollars. Unlike other ways of purchasing property, Scott's incentives are aligned with you, the buyer, meaning the more money he saves you, the more money he makes, which is what you want. You need to have those incentives aligned. Scott has kindly offered our group a massive discount on the retainer fee for his service. So if you're looking to buy your next home or investment property, click the link below to get in touch.
Yeah, so get in touch. But what I was going to say, so the person of the live, we have. So who is Daniel He? Who we got in front of us tonight? So
who is he?
We have an active property developer. Oh, it's 50 million. Okay. Did you change that, Dan?
I may have edited that last minute, Jeff. So
so you need to update the website then, because it only says 40 million on your website. Gee, so yeah, what's 10 million between friends?
Short
I suppose
change.
So. Yeah, just small change. Property deals for small to medium-sized resi developments over 16 years. So you look much younger than. Gee, I mean, did you do your first deal when you're 12, 13? That's impressive. Well done. You are also a property director at Crowd Property, which, for those interested, is an online platform that bridges property developers, funding, and all that sort of good stuff. So you've been I think you've also been heavily involved in the startup sort of community as well, in many sort of, a couple sort of, yeah. So I think I'd call you an entrepreneur and somewhat of an innovator as well, I would say.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I've certainly been called much worse things, so really appreciate that, Jeff. And
there we go.
really good to be here with you guys. And I thought about, after having a chat with you guys earlier last week, was how do we add value to the group, right? And one of the things that you guys mentioned was stories. So why don't we start with a couple of stories, maybe some of the deals that I've done. I'll go through my first property deal ever that I did when I was in my early 20s. We'll go through a current deal that we did that was completed about 5 months ago. We'll talk about some of the deals that Crowd Property has funded as well. There'll be some tips too for property developers out there, both beginning and advanced. So tips on how to get your finance, and some of the tips and tricks that can really help you on your journey. And for the property investors out there, how you can involved if you didn't want to do all of the difficult due diligence and things like that involved with property investing. So there's something in it for everyone. And and like I said, very pleased to be here talking about it with you guys, Jeff and Joe.
Love that, mate. Love that. All about adding value. Awesome. So this is the session here, how to find and fund your next development. Daniel has put together some slides. Now, anyone that's listening to this on the podcast, this is not going to be one of those episodes where I think you're going to have to, jump on. You don't have to jump on the YouTube, and don't end the podcast because you think it's going to be more visuals. But
keep
there are
listening to the podcast. Yeah,
I would say don't bother jumping on YouTube. I think hopefully you'll be all right here. But let's kind of, if you're on YouTube, listen to it on YouTube. Hang on, let's just pop our little silly faces. Now, Daniel is part of a business that does property development, so he does have to have this disclaimer up here, and read that and acknowledge that, please. But I'm more interested.
Hit the screen if you agree.
Yeah. I'm more interested in your property journey, Daniel. Let's dive in. So give us a bit of a rundown. What are we looking at here, mate?
This is your first property purchase, was it?
Yeah, first property purchase. It was many years ago, mid 2000s. Felt like yesterday, probably because of how painful it was. Right, like it's a classic case of how many mistakes can you make on your very first property purchase. So. The thing with this property, the location was really good. It was about 10 k's outside of the Sydney CBD. It was on 500 square meters. It was a 3-bedroom double brick home. So it ticks a few boxes. But but very quickly I realized that you made the rookie mistake of paying too much. So you go to auction, you bid, and you just don't put your hand down, right? So I think in the purchase, I think we would have paid probably somewhere between 10, maybe 12% over market for the very first property.
Wow. How much was it, by the way? Was it a couple like 200,000 or 300,000 or 400?
It was 499,000 flat. So,
and are we talking west of the CBD? Are we talking north of it or south of the CBD?
Southwest.
Okay.
Sydney.
When was this?
2003.
6, I think it was 2005. I think it was. Yeah.
Okay.
And paying too much is one thing, but then you quickly start to realize that it's not quite a cosmetic renovation, right? You discover because of the termite damage, it's like, okay, well, now we've got to also replace all of the bearers and joists on the property.
Oh, wow.
Get rid of all of that.
Did you know about the termites before the deal? I
did not. No, I did not. And this was silliness and jumping to a deal too quickly, having seen the property once, but without doing proper due diligence. And
so can I ask a question there about, because you bought it at auction. So if you, knowing, having your time again and knowing what you know now, would you, if you were really serious about a deal, would you do a pest and building on the property pre-auction?
If I was bidding on it and I was looking to retain the property, then definitely yes, Jeff. The exception to that is these days we were involved in development, so a lot of times the property does get knocked over. It wasn't the case here. We were going to retain the property, do a renovation, and retain the property. So if it wasn't to be bowled over, I definitely would have done a building pest report. And for what you're paying for a report, right? So it's a few $100, maybe $1,000, maybe a bit more, versus back then it was a $499,000 property, a very small investment. So in hindsight, yeah, that would have been nice, right, Jeff? Where were you back in mid 2000s? Could you have given me
still in high school?
Nappies.
I was going to my parents' eyes actually. No, just was born.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I was only just getting into. I was end of year 10 actually. Crazy.
Right.
Yeah. So young.
Yeah, but it's interesting. So the key lessons out of this, what did you take away? Like, what have you taken with you? What pain have you brought?
So you can never do too much due diligence, right? Like, have a checklist. Classic. You guys may have heard of Atul Gawande, the checklist manifesto. He's an American surgeon. He basically changed the way that surgery is done, and have a checklist, right? And we have checklists in what we do at Crowd Property. I have checklists in what we do in property development. And the thing is, you don't miss stuff if you have a checklist. It's nothing, nothing magical about it. It's just there. You tick, cross. Really important to have a checklist template. And the second lesson that I learned, and this is not the end of the story here, is that bad luck probably compounds on bad decisions. So 2 days before the settlement, I showed up to do my pre-settlement inspection, and of course there's police tape out the front of this particular property. So I said, went over to the neighbors and I said, hey, what's going on here, guys? And they said, you don't know, and you're purchasing the property? I said, yes, I am that property. And you can't make this up, right? So the local person who decided to go and rob the local petrol station decided to take refuge in this particular property. So he's hidden his weapon in the gutter next to the house. He broke into the house. He stole the sort of blankets and things like that from the neighbors, and basically took refuge for about 2 weeks until the sniffer dogs tracked him down. So from our perspective, there was police tape. It was all over the local newspaper, and there was a couple of $1,000s worth of damage done as well. So yeah.
Good advertising. If you was that first was it going to be a flip, like so a Reno and flip, was it?
There's going to be a Reno and keep actually. So I'm not sure about the no bad publicity thing on that one.
Yeah, I feel like it doesn't apply to property. Any publicity is good publicity when it comes to your property investment. But I had a very similar situation with a reno of mine. I stupidly, it wasn't the best. Definitely was not one of the best areas. But I stupidly got all of the blinds delivered the day before. I was going to install them, so there were no blinds in the entire property. So anyone that walked past on the street, there's just these massive glass windows with no curtains, blinds, or anything. And then you look in, you turn your head right, and then you just see all of this brand new stuff sat in the middle of the house. So then I get a call the next day from the blind guy saying, "Hey, where are the blinds?" And I'm like, what do you mean? But they somehow broke in. They didn't smash anything. They didn't break any walls or anything like that. The door, they unlocked it somehow, closed it, locked it again, and just had missing blinds. So don't deliver stuff if you don't have blinds. I love it. Okay, so this is, let me try and add this. Yeah. Is this the reno? Bloody hell. You did all right.
Yeah, it's turned out okay. Despite all of the initial headwinds on this particular property, it actually showed up all right. We basically it was, by the way, it was no longer a cosmetic renovation, right? We did everything: the doors, windows. I think the only thing that remained in the place was actually the roof, the rafters in the ceiling. Everything else had changed. We even rendered the exterior of it, but we did okay. We had it revalued, and we ended up doing a profit on cost analysis on it, and it ended up being about 16% in the end. So so yeah, despite all of that, things can still work out, and it's kind of a story for property development. It's never a straightforward journey. It's about how you land the plane, right, and how you navigate through the headwinds to get to where you need to get
Do you
to.
still own this one? These look like sales photos though, but
No, we sold it a few years after, in order to extract out the equity, and to put into things like property developments and subdivisions actually. So
do you ever go back to that property and look at what it's worth now, or you don't do that to yourself?
No, I mean, I think if we all did that for every property that we used to own, we'd just go mad, right? Like,
I do it sometimes, and I
You're not
sometimes
happy
swear
about
into
it.
a mirror. But that's okay.
So that sounds like it was very tough. Like, how did you fall? Like, renovation is tough, and anyone that's like, oh, reno is easy, you can make hundreds of thousands of dollars. No, you can, but it's not easy. It's simple, not easy. How'd you turn into a developer? Like, what was that? Where was that jump? And what happened?
yeah, so what gave me the confidence was actually doing this. That was my first project. I don't come from a tradesman background, or I'm not an inherent builder. And if I figured if I was able to make profit where everything could possibly go wrong, then imagine if we did some things right. And so that kind of gave me the confidence to say, look, maybe this is not magic, and maybe there is some sort of formula in this. And so that gave me some confidence to do further deals. On the back of that, I thought I'd get some mentoring. So I have a couple of mentors that I still work with and talk to almost on a weekly basis that provide me with some advice, and they themselves have mentors. So I think that's very crucial, very important. And yeah, it's about doing bigger deals over time, right? And that didn't happen overnight. Like that was mid 2000s, 2006. So what's that? 17 years ago, and progressively doing bigger and bigger projects. So it's what do they say? You underestimate what you can do. You overestimate what you can do in a year and underestimate what you can do in 10, right? So if you're incrementally just doing bigger stuff and hopefully better stuff, then we'll all get there.
Take the lessons and throw them into the next one. I love that. Okay. And now we've got a picture of a house. Big block by the looks of things. House smack bang in the middle of it. Don't think it's a retain and build. What's this one?
No, definitely a knockdown rebuild. So this is a much more recent project. So fast forward that 15, 17 years. This was a pandemic purchase. And this project actually recently finished at the end of last year. So this was on about 750 square meters. What I really liked about it is its location. It's about 7 minutes outside of CBD down Adelaide way. And it's got a massive frontage. It's got 25-meter frontage. So we knew from doing research, from doing due diligence, from talking to town planners, from talking to council, from talking to our architects, that we can fit 3 decent-sized 2-story, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1-car properties on there. But the interesting thing here was that we made an offer, it was accepted, and we had I think it was either a 60 or a 90-day settlement. And a few weeks before the settlement, the pandemic hit, and the agent actually ended up calling us almost on a daily basis. I said, what's going on? He said, I just want to make sure that you settle on the property, right? I said, yes, it's unconditional. We've got 2 weeks to go. It's ready. And I said, what's going on? He goes, well, there's a little bug that's going around, and it's forcing people not to settle their properties. And out of his properties that he sold, I think 3 of them fell over despite them being unconditional. But
wow.
But for us, we had done our homework on this one. We knew what we could put on there. We knew that by the time we had built them in a year and a half, 2 years, that all the approvals and stuff, that probably was going to be a different market. And we banked on that, and we had enough margin in the deal to ensure that even in the worst case scenario, we were still making some money. We were still in profit, and so that gave us the confidence for us to move forward with the deal.
So how did you decide? How did you decide Adelaide? Like, it was a budgetary based, or what was the reason you went to Adelaide?
Yeah, so it was very much it was very much market driven. Like, I mean, there's positives about Adelaide, right? The wine. We used to holiday down in Adelaide, so we're very familiar with the area. And one thing I like about Adelaide is the planning system. You know, it's very predictable. I think I mentioned to you guys that we got a development through in a matter of weeks, whereas in some other states, which shall remain nameless, it's months before they even look at your application.
Victoria, maybe.
Like I said,
every other state, every other state but South Australia.
And so we liked about that, but the biggest driver, guys, was market forces. You know, I looked at my own backyard in Sydney, and nothing stacked. We were doing tens, if not hundreds, of feasibilities. Nothing made sense. We went down to Adelaide. I think I did about 10, maybe 15 feasos, and 3 of them stacked. So reached out to the wider network, and you know, grateful that people were able to help me out, put me onto good consultants and good help, and the rest is history. So
yeah, that's one thing I was going to mention, is that you've gone from I found this property and I did the renovation and I did a lot of work on it. It's now changed to we've now done the development, and we found it, and the partners, and so what is that kind of, I mean, will this go into a deeper situation about the finance side of things? But I guess, can you talk to that a little bit? Maybe give a bit of a teaser of what that actually looks like, of, you know, as an individual that may not have hundreds of that. Well, you need to build 3 houses. So you need a lot of cash to be able to do that. Maybe just, let's talk to what that would look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a big advocate of the property game is bricks and mortar, yes, but it's actually a people game. Because if we try and do every single aspect of the deal, we would just be overwhelmed. And to be quite frank, probably over our ability and depth, right? So whilst we've had civil engineers, architects, financiers, town planners, as a developer, you're actually none of those things. Your job is to actually maintain the trajectory of the project and make sure that you're making decisions that are keeping in line with where you want to go. And you hire consultants that are local. So all of the consultants that we use on this project are local. We hire people who have dealt with the councils that we've dealt with, have put through similar applications, who have a good success. And so that team, and it's the same
on that team that you built, you didn't know any of them. Because there's a question that's come up here. There's a little statement that someone says, it's hard when you have no we, but you had no we in South Australia. So that might be a bit of a limiting belief that Facebook user has, that you created the we yourself.
Yeah,
or
so that was
the person
you had a great network.
So look, this wasn't the first project we did in Adelaide, right? So this is
you had a we, damn it.
we had a we, but look, I can talk to when we first went down to Adelaide, and it's just about reaching out to the wider network to say, look, who do you use, and are they reliable? And I was fortunate enough to have people that were very competent, very good at what they did, and they were happy to share, good consultants they used on projects themselves. And similarly, if somebody goes down to Adelaide, I would happily share the same guys that recommend, and probably in many parts of Australia that we've done developments in as well, right? So I would say that the consultants you use on projects differ from project to project. So this is probably one of the smaller projects that we do, a very simple 1 into 3. The larger projects that we do, some of the sort of large townhouses, land divisions, et cetera, different consultants, different caliber, and horses for courses. There's a good consultant out there for the right project, for the right time, in your journey. You just got to go out and find one, I think.
Yeah, and are there situations when you're starting out, you pay a little bit more for your consultants, and you get more consultants on, for instance, like a helper, like there's buyer's agents, right? Like who find investment grade properties, right? That's a helper. That person's going to find, your development site for you. And then there's people that are developers that are like developer agents. If I don't know if you have a word for it, but it's just a developer that will help run the program for you and help do all of the things. They have all the connections and they do all of that stuff.
The project manager, isn't it, Joe? You'd say, like, you can actually hire like do some town planners also help with project management, Dan or Dan?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm big on outsourcing things, right? So engineers for engineering, land surveyors for land surveying, architects for drawings and design. One thing that I've learned that you can't outsource is whether a project is a go or a no-go. You've got to own that decision. You've got to really take responsibility for whether a project moves forward or not, because you don't know everything by the time you get into a project, right? You might be 80% confident that if all goes well, you'll make X profit, but you can't ever be 100% confident. There's always a degree of risk in property development, in fact, in any investment. So for me, it's making sure that you own that decision, and once you've made that decision, running the project, and that part could be outsourced to somebody like a PM or a DM, right? But you've got to really own that.
So a DM's a development manager for, as far as I know, and PM is a project manager.
Well, what's the difference? What's the difference between a PM that DMs?
Yeah, I mean, they are to a certain extent interchangeable. You could argue that the project manager specifically is involved in the build process, whereas the development manager could be involved in things like acquisition, getting the DA approved, getting finance even. So they're throughout the process, where my understanding is that the PM's probably more involved in just the build process itself.
And you would typically have a larger project to be able to, like, it would be a larger project that would need someone to just a PM, and then you're not going to have both. You're going to, if you're just starting out and you're doing a retain and build, or 1 into 3 or 1 into 5, you're not going to have that many people.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the developers that I know are 1 or 2 man bands, right? They go out and they do everything. And there are successful guys who are running, 15, 20 projects all at once, and it's just 1 or 2 people. And there are guys who are happily have a full-time or a part-time job and doing property development part-time as well. So you've really got to find the balance of what works for you. And there's no, I guess, magical formula. It's what works for you and what sort of projects you want to be doing, I guess.
So you went with three properties. So you knocked down 1 house, you cleared the land, and you subdivided them 3 into Torrance titles. Why did you decide to go 2 double story rather than single story? And you talk to the cost difference between a single story and a double story property and time.
Could you show us? Oh, here we go. We weren't looking at it. I was like, why aren't we looking at this?
Yeah.
Sorry, Jeff. So
we knew the in the area that the target demographic was actually is actually a mixed target demographic. So we've got some first home buyers, we've got some professionals in the area, and we've also got quite a few downsizers, right? So people who are sitting on 1,000 square meters who don't really want to be doing any more maintenance, et cetera. So having that mixed bag of target market at the end, you really want a product that appeals to all of them. So one of the key things that we did here was we actually put a master bedroom on the ground floor. Yeah. So what that means is that,
great idea,
even if you're a downsizer and you don't like climbing stairs, you can basically live downstairs. You've got your master bedroom, you've got your bathroom there, you've got your living, and when the grandkids come over or when you've got visitors, stick them upstairs. So you're not having to climb those stairs every single day. The other reason why we went with 2-story here was because it just simply wasn't enough space. Like, if you wanted a decent house here, I think it was 185 square meters of living. You really needed to do double story. If we went with single story, I think that would have been significantly less. And we knew from research that 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom and 1 garage properties were in demand, whereas the 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom was far less in demand, and the price point was quite significant. So we did numbers on both of those, and we realized very quickly what the product had to be. Now, ideally, the frontage would have been wider, and we hopefully could have done double garages, but that was not possible. But you also can't have everything, right? So.
Can I ask a question about how you learned or how you decided on what the demographics or demographic was in your area?
Yeah, so couple of things. I mean, I went out to Adelaide, checked it out. As simple as that sounds, right? Walked the suburb. I did.
Would you say boots on the ground?
Boots on the ground. Absolutely.
You can't do it from a desk, can you, Joe? I mean, you have to visit an area. You have to smell the fish and chips and maybe
smell the fish and chips. I feel like you don't. Sorry, go on, Dan.
Put that on a TikTok.
Inside joke. Someone buy me a shirt that says boots on the ground.
So boots on the ground and seeing the place, speaking to real estate agents in the area who've sold similar projects. Just say, look, who's purchased them? Who are the buyers out there paying money for this sort of thing? And then just getting some very basic, ABS data. Just go, well, in the last census, what does the typical family look like? What sort of housing do they live in? Is it detached? Is it units? How many people rent in the area? How many people buy in the area? And what sort of houses do they currently live in? And what sort of properties do they actually want to live in? And if you create something that people want and ultimately want to move into, then you're probably halfway to a good development, I think.
I'd say so. And time-wise, on a development for a 2-story, is there much of a difference? Is it much of a muchness, or is there a longer lead time? Because time is money on these type of things as well.
Yeah, sorry, you did ask that question. My apologies. Look, no. The single story is an easier build, right? There's no scaffolding. You put it up and away you go. So if you asked this question a couple of years ago, the standard was probably going to be somewhere between sort of 6 to 9 months to have it built, right? So, but
wow.
Post-pandemic world, I think you could easily double that in this day and age. I think the restrictions are easing. I think the trades are easing. I think the materials are certainly easing. Prices are coming back down. So I think that eventually will curtail. But until then, I think allow plenty of time for a development. So one example on this particular site was the decision between timber frames and steel frames. And I think, I had this discussion with my very experienced builder. He's the 4th generation builder down in Adelaide. And I said, what should we do here? We went in the period of 3 months, we went timber, steel, timber, steel, timber, steel. And that was driven by what was available. Pricing, availability, or hang on, we've got a shortage here, or no, hang on, we can't do this.
And then labor to do it as well.
And people who were qualified to put up steel frames versus absolutely right. And so,
wow.
We certainly didn't anticipate that going into the deal, but these are sorts of things that you have to deal with as they.
This would have been absolutely ridiculous deal to work like during the pandemic. Like you bought it pandemic time and then just experiencing this entire situation like at the hardest possible time. Well done. You don't have an easy contract go on that anyway, do you?
Yeah, I mean, we were quite fortunate to have a fixed price contract on that, and just like a lot of builders who sign up for that, that's not what they sign up for, right? Like their costs are significantly higher than probably what they ended up charging us. So, I mean, we could have said no. I mean, fulfill your contract, but in the end, what we did was we actually ended up fixing up the builder for a lot more than what we bargained for as a show of good faith, because it's somebody that we've worked with on a few occasions. But the other thing we didn't anticipate was the profit on costs in this project, which initially was sort of, I'm happy to share the percentages. I think was sitting around about 19%, and it was substantially higher than I think it was sitting at sort of high 30s profit on costs, which you don't expect going in. It's a bit of a bonus, but
You
but with
bought at a
interest
great
rates
time,
up,
I suppose.
Unreal return. What does it come down to? What does that 19 to 30%? How did you get that 10?
Timing. So like I said, we were buying when nobody else was buying. We stuck through the project when a lot of people just gave up and decided not to build, right? So I kind of feel like in some ways we're sort of hitting that mark now where a lot of people are sort of pulling back, going, oh, development's too hard. There's a lot of headwinds. Are the banks going to collapse? Where are interest rates sitting at the moment? But I'm sort of going, this is perfect time for getting into the market, right? When nobody else is doing.
I'm kind of like, I don't want to say this obviously because it's not a nice thing to say, but I'm kind of like upset that interest rates have now started to kind of level off. Because
it's hard to buy.
The content right now, it's very hard to buy in good markets, in good properties. It's very, very hard to buy. And if interest rates and sentiment comes back, there's going to be a flood of people, want to be property investors that are going to jump into the market and inflate things. I thought we had another 6 months before that started to happen. But I'm a little concerned it's going to happen now, and it's going to be even harder to buy. So if you are, not that we can give out any financial advice, but I feel like people are ready to go and have the finance and are able to buy. Now, obviously, interest rates have risen a lot, and some people can no longer afford that $550,000, $600,000 property. But there are a lot of people that have the money, have the capacity, have the income, and are going to jump back into the market now that they see a little bit of sentiment fixing up next. But there's been a question. Sorry.
Two questions. So this is from our guest next week, actually. So did they? So this is he also does some stuff in Adelaide. So he wants to know, did these require a private planner, or was it a complying? So which one?
Yeah, so it was a private certifier that signed these off. I think the way it was designed, I think it ticked like 9 out of 10 boxes. Like there were some things that sort of didn't quite hit all of the marks, but it was enough to get through a private planner, private certifier, and so it was quite smooth. He approved it basically in 2 weeks, which was quite good. The subdivision itself does go through council itself, so while the planning we knew we could build what we wanted to build, to actually subdivide into 3 Torrens titles, that took a bit longer, but because it happened concurrently, that was all okay. I think overall it was about 4 or 5 months for approvals, which is very good actually.
Pretty quick. You want to ask the other one, Joe? Is that the one?
I don't know what the other one is.
There's somebody that said, how much would you expect? So I imagine Aaron's talking about profit on cost, which there's the magic number of 20%. Dan, is that the one that is still being bandied around the development sort of industry? 20%?
Yeah, exactly right. The magic number of 20%. But look, there's so many variations to that. It depends on deal size. Where is the deal? Are you including interest calculations? Time. Yep. The longer it's elapsed, the lower that's going to be. But every deal is different, right? And a deal that's 15% profit on cost could be fine if it's a 1 into 2 simple build, right? Whereas a 100 lot subdivision, you're probably looking at significantly higher in that 25% plus. Not every deal, but it depends on the risk and reward, and the profit on cost is one of the things that we look at.
Yeah. I think we teased it a lot.
Speaking of things to look at, we have the top 5 categories of due diligence. So I think that's kind of what we want this session to be about, learning about how to do a development, and how to do a development is purely, I guess, due diligence, right? Can you explain? Well, maybe give us explain what due diligence is. This is a bit of a stupid question. Let's just dive in. Let's get to the good stuff, because we all know what due diligence is.
Making sure it's good, making sure it's going to make money, right? That's what due diligence is.
Can you see the screen, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. So 57 steps is what we have. So this is what we do at Craft Property. So my other hat, other than property developer, is working in as property director at Crowd Property. So part of my role and my wider team's role is to ensure we do proper due diligence on a project. And this is what you see here on the screen is a 57-step process that was developed initially over in the UK. We've had probably 5, maybe 8 iterations of that since then. This is not the latest iteration. This is one of the earlier iterations of it. And it may be a bit hard to read, but what it essentially does is it allocates jobs for each person in our team to do. So this one is involved with the borrower manager. This is the assistant director who does this. Is the property director. So I would do a lot of the work in the third swim lane, and then other. So that involves people like the wider investment committee. So we've got several levels of checks that add up to the 57 steps. So some of that is internal, some of that is externally validated, and we'll go through a lot of this in detail. The key thing here is that you do due diligence and you do it well and you do it consistently. And if you think everything is a green light, probably do more due diligence, because there's not many deals that are completely green lights.
Yeah. So is this due diligence talking about actually finding the deal and crunching the due diligence on that, or is that after, once you've kind of committed to the deal?
Yeah, so this due diligence, sorry, I should have explained that. So this due diligence is when people submit their project to us for funding. So so we would look at it from the perspective of, right, does it fit the criteria of the credit policy, for example? Is there enough profit on cost? Does the developer have enough equity in the project? So on and so forth. So so this is after they submit the project. But if you go to the next page, Joe, so we've got a bit of a checklist that the developers, so this one's for the developers out there that they can use to make sure that their project stacks up, right? Because these are the sort of filters and research that we'll be doing. So we expect the developer to have already done most, if not all of that, when they've acquired the project. So let's dive straight into it. So market data. So we look at things like values by type, square meterage by type. So is what they're building typical of, say, a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-garage dwelling that in that suburb? Are we pitching too much at the higher end, or are we going too low market for the area? Making sure there's enough transaction volume. Is there enough 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car properties that are selling, that are new? If there's 3 per year, that's you're kind of almost pioneering. If there's 30, if there's 300, then you probably consider the other side, right? Is there too much competition in the area? So whilst there's no magic formula, it's really important that you consider this sort of supply and transactional volume, and then comparables. What are they selling for? How much are they getting? What have they done wrong on a particular project to have gotten a penalty on their price? What do they do right to get way above what the average development sells for? So that's the market data. The next one is third-party references. So delving into that a little bit further, we look at things like land titles, council overlays, Department of Transport, if it's in an area where there's state roads, for example. We look at sales volumes and sales data again. We even talk to real estate agents who have sold property in the area, just to get their gauge of what they think of a development. And if they were to sell one, would it be easy to sell? Would it be difficult to sell? What would they recommend the floor plans to be? Valuation and validation. So this is where we get third parties involved. So if you submit a project to Crowd Property, one of the things that we do once we've reviewed it is actually to do a third-party independent valuation. So that's a qualified valuer doing a commercial valuation. So when you purchase a normal investment property, land with a house on it, it would take 2 days to get a turnaround on that valuation. That's doing what they call an as-is valuation. So the land and house exactly as is today. but when you do a commercial valuation, what that involves is much more detail. So one of the things they do is what they call an as-if complete valuation. So with the specifications that you've submitted, with the approvals, and with the level of finishes, if that was built today, what would that market value be? So you can see there's a bit of prediction here, right? Like the valuer has to, based on your drawings, figure out what today's value is, and that's why it takes a long time. So it could be, as quick as a couple of weeks. It could be as long as a month for them to do that valuation, and that valuation provides some insight as to what the valuer is worried about on that particular, what the risks are. So that's good feedback for us assessing the deal. That's also good feedback for the developer getting into the deal to know that a third party has looked at it independently and has reviewed the project as well.
So that's pretty much the process, right? Market data, third party references, so getting checks by other people, valuation and validation, and the borrower, project information.
Yeah, so borrower. So we find out about the borrower themselves, why they want to do this development, their costings to make sure that they've got all their T's crossed and I's dotted. That's something we also look at. But if you're a developer, also ask yourself, are you doing this to hold? Are you doing this to sell? Make sure you've got a clear path to that and stick with it, whether things are going well or not. On the right-hand side, we've got in-house expertise. So within crowd property, it says 100, but we've probably got a wider expertise now. We've probably got about 150 years of property development experience in-house, and I would say that once we do the project, it's learning by doing, and we're always learning ourselves on new things. There's things that none of us have seen, but we've also realized that everyone's learning on their process. So it pays to have that expertise on the team to maybe provide some early advice on deals and maybe anticipate some issues that you may not have foreseen.
Have you zoomed enough, Joe? Is that
That's as far as I can zoom.
Oh yeah, fair enough. That's pretty good. So in terms of when you talked, because I think this is one of the parts that people potentially underestimate, particularly if you're going to sell exit strategy consultation. Typically, how many exit strategies would you like to see in a project, or how many do you do in yours? Do you like to have 3 or 4, or is one enough, depending on the project?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 main ones, right? You either sell it or you keep it, right? Like that's
one consultation or 2.
And look, all jokes aside, be very clear when you're doing a project what you're intending to do, because it affects things like structuring. Like if you're going to keep both of them, do you really want to subdivide? And again, this is not advice, right? But these are some of the things you should be considering. Like, do you really want to subdivide and pay 2 sets of land tax and pay 2 sets of council fees, et cetera, et cetera? Or if you're going to sell, well, you better make sure it's subdivided, because you can only if you have 2 that's not subdivided, then you can only sell it as 1, and that'll dramatically decrease your the value on the back end. So it's really important. And the other thing is, if you're holding it, are you able to refinance it with a bank, for example, to hold it for that that 20 to 30 year term? So they're just some of the considerations and some of the things that we actually ask developers when they come in for funding. DigiMaps, we've sort of spoken about that before. Topography, street view, overlays, flooding, et cetera, et cetera. That's pretty.
And you're doing all of this before you commit to the deal.
Yeah. So a lot of this we're asking the developers to provide us how they thought about these things, and we'll maybe highlight something that the developer may have overlooked, and we'll say, look, hey, Joe or Jeff, have you thought about the fact that it's in a bushfire zone, or have you thought about the fact that it's abutting a heritage property next door, and when you do your development, you need to make sure you're not affecting the heritage nature of your neighbor. Those sorts of things, and a lot of times they have, a lot of times they haven't. So it's just about whether they've thought about these additional risk factors.
Are there deals that you do where it's a beautiful deal, it all stacks up from a fantastic deal, but then the person that's submitted it to you just isn't a developer? They're not the type of person that should be doing this deal, and then you just have to turn it down?
Yeah, exactly right. So this is part of the team that we spoke about earlier on. Who is the team? Now, we'll look at potentially funding first-time developers. There's everyone's first development, but how much skin do they have in the game? Who is their wider team? Are they being mentored by people who have done this before? How much time are they dedicating to this? Those are sort of questions that we try and tease out. And for their first project, is it a 1:2 subdivision and build, or is it a 1:30 lot subdivision? Right, the risk profiles of those are very, very different. So, so sometimes we'll stipulate that that they engage a project manager to do a lot of the running around on the project for them, if we feel that they're not, if they don't have the time or they're not quite capable of delivering a project of that size. So we've done that on a recent project as well, to make sure that there is good oversight, I guess, on that particular project. The project was great. It was just we needed somebody who was a bit more switched on to run it.
And how did that affect the ROI of the deal?
Not a lot actually. It wasn't, it wasn't a big cost. It was a relatively large subdivision, and they had, very high six figures in terms of profit. So it was barely a dent to get a project manager onto the thing, and they're worth their weight in gold, especially when it comes to things like drawdowns and making sure that the builders have built what they're supposed to have built, and resolving issues that are on site as well. So it's proven to be quite invaluable. One last thing on this slide, if I may. Sorry if I'm going over time here. Resilience data. So this is actually quite critical, because we look at up to 20 years of suburb data for that particular development. Now, in that 20 years, we see areas, times when it's been really good and they've gone up in value. There are times when it's really come back. So in suburbs, like recently, that's come back, 15, even 20%. So we incorporate that into our assessment process, and we say, look, even if the value falls by that 15 to 20%, our investors, can we still do the deal for the developer, and can our investors get money back if they invested in it? So that's quite crucial, I think.
Yeah, that what if analysis. What if rates rise by 3%? What is going to happen to this deal? What if I hit a stormwater, like I hit a pipe and it bursts and it's going to cost $20,000? What if the demo takes 6 months longer? What if? And if you can then smush all of those together and you're still making money, then you may be onto a winner there. Yeah, that's such a good.
Is that 20-year suburb reports? That's sort of like an absolute premium CoreLogic subscription, isn't it? Like, how do you access? Like, it's like
there's various ways you can get subscription to that, but let's just say it's a paid service. It's not available.
It's not a cheap one. Yeah, have to chat about that one offline.
And then share it, Jeff. Share it with the world. Oh God. Okay, so we got a fun little spreadsheet here.
I don't
know. FISO, is it? This is a FISO.
So don't tell me you do FISOs as well. Surely not.
So this is when we input data into our own appraisal sheet. You can see there's yellow. This is the areas where we can input things. There's the green where it does some calculations for you, and then there's the red. The red is where it highlights issues with the project that don't normally fit into our policy and our criteria. Now, we recognize that every deal is different, so we don't reject all deals that have red flags, but we do look at those red flags and go, right, knowing what we know, is the risk worth taking for the developer, and should they really be doing the deal? So we make sure that several checks, right? So this goes to not only us in the credit team, which consists of Jack, Peter, Alan, and I, but it goes to the wider investment committee, which involves senior management and in crowd property in UK as well as here as well. So it goes through different levels. It also goes through our trustee key, which is another layer of safety because they need to comply with all the requirements with ASIC as well. So it's not just Daniel He saying this ticks boxes, therefore we should fund this deal. There's quite a few layers involved here.
There's a great question here. What are some red flags that kind of come up?
Yeah, very, very good question. Look, it could be deal related, it could be borrower related, and I think we've actually gone through some of these just now. So one of the common ones is there's not enough equity in the deal, like as in the developer hasn't put enough money into the deal himself, and
hurt money they call it.
Hurt money, right? So
into the game, whatever. Yeah.
So, for example, if we fund 80% of the cost of construction, are they putting in the 20%? If they only had 10%, then they need to go out and raise some money. And we've not done deals in the past where they needed to raise, I think it was 150,000, and they only raised about 50 to 100 short. So despite the economics stacking up, it was too much a risk for us to take for the investors that we represent on the platform. So we didn't do that deal. Another one might be first time, like we spoke about before, first time property developers who are doing too big of a deal, trying to do a 1 into 100 subdivision, for example. Or another one might be the end product is not reflective of the target demographic. So going back to the example I gave earlier, if I had built 1 story, 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom, 1 garage dwellings, that probably would not have stacked up at all for that particular area, because that's not what was in demand. It was that extra bedroom. It was the extra space that they needed to accommodate people, and that's what people wanted. So,
love that. Yeah, it's so important to do the due diligence. Oh God, I've do the due diligence. No, I messed it up. Around who is that? What is the end product, and do people actually want it? I imagine you see so many deals where you look at an area and you're like, that product is not suitable for the people that live there. That's just not gonna fly.
Can I ask a question about sorry, on the one carrying on what Joe just said there about it not flying. How much of it is quantitative versus qualitative? Because you can look at ABS data and say, yes, that's the data behind it, but then is it also then a combination of speaking to agents as well? Like what holds a client waiting?
So it is an art as well as a science, right? So you can do the best predictions, and it could be a completely different target demographic. What we're aiming for is to maximize your chances of selling it to the target demographic that you're targeting. And it could be something completely different, right? It could, we had a professional by one of my developments. We had a downsizer couple. We had a first home buyer, and it just worked out that that's the 3 target markets that we were targeting. But it could have been very easily 3 downsizers, right? But what you didn't want to do is you didn't want to sort of cut out that demographic completely. So one of the things that we encourage people to do is talk to us if you're looking for funding, but we can help you with stuff like that, but also talk to the local agents who've got their boots on the ground, for example.
Yeah, it's unreal the amount of like local knowledge that's available from a property manager about what kind of thing do I need. Like having that conversation to a property manager about a development that you're buying because you're going to rent it out. What is going to be the best rental, as well as speaking with a real estate agent, what is going to actually sell this. So I'm excited to talk about something called the capital stack, and we can dive into that. So for people that don't know what the capital stack is, it's you're going to learn. So I don't know how to pump up the capital stack, but we're going to go to an ad and then we're going to be right back. The amazing thing with commercial property investing is that in most cases, it's cash flow positive from day one, which means that you can drive those profits towards paying down the debt. There are instances with commercial property investing where you can actually have the property pay itself off over 10 years, which is absolutely crazy. With commercial property, you get massive net yields, so you can expect anywhere between 6 to 10%. And as we've seen in the current boom, these properties not only provide large cash flow, they do certainly grow wildly in value too. Now, with big rewards comes some risk, and this is why you should de-risk your investment as much as possible. And the way you do that is with expert due diligence. And this is why we highly recommend people hire professionals to help you along in your investing journey. Steve Polisi of Polisi Property is one such expert. Being a chartered mechanical and structural engineer in a past life, Steve draws on his analytical and mathematical skills to do that expert due diligence for you. With 6 years experience in the space, Steve has over 1,200 property transactions under his belt. He's the guy you want in your corner, crunching the numbers and finding the best properties in the best locations, along with ensuring that you avoid the mistakes. Steve has actually even written the book on commercial property investing in Australia. And not only is it a bestseller, I believe it to be the most comprehensive in commercial property investing on the market today. He's been generous enough to give us a massive discount for our audience of 50%. So use the code OZPROP, click the link below, get a copy today, and start learning and getting on your commercial property investing journey.
Turns out, funny, I looked up Capital Stack and I went down the Capital Stack worm rabbit hole because I was just interested. But there's a podcast on it. But sorry, go. You go, Joe.
No. Maybe you're best to ask this question, Jeff. The initial question about capital stacks.
Yeah. So tell us what is it about a capital stack and why is it important for your development?
Yeah, very good question. Look, every single financier that's been on a podcast or a presentation butchers the capital stack, right? They put up this pyramid, and you've got your equity at the common equity at the top and the senior debt down the bottom, right? It's important to know two perspectives. One is if you're doing property development, there are many ways to skin a cat. So you require $1 million in funding for a project. You can get that through by getting common equity. You can get that by getting preferred equity. You can get that through mezz debt. You can do that through senior debt. As you progress down, the lower the risk, the lower the return. So senior debt is generally the cheapest, which is the area that we play in. The common equity is the highest risk and highest return because that's put at risk first. So from the
let's bring this intro up so it makes sense. Yeah. And can you explain what the heck a common equity? Now, I just know equity. I know when I buy a thing and it goes to 200 grand, $1,000 increase, that's my equity. What is common equity, preferred equity, mezzanine debt, and senior debt? Give us a run through.
Yeah, absolutely. So common equity is typically where the developer sits, right? So that's the riskiest amount of equity or money you put into the deal. And the reason why it's the riskiest is because it's the first money to go into a deal and really the last, before all of the others get paid, before the preferred equity, the mezz debts. So from the investor's perspective, if you're investing in common equity, you want a really high return for that because that's probably the riskiest on that scale. Conversely, if you're investing into senior debt, the return's not as high, but you've got a very good chance of getting your money back along with interest payments as well, right? Because you're into the deal last when everyone else has put their money in, and you also, once the property is sold or refinanced, you get your money out first. So the chances of getting that back is really, really high.
So what are some examples of senior? Last in, first out.
Last in, first out. What are some examples of senior debt? Like, who is the typical senior debtor?
The banks. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. There's a reason why the banks play in that space, because it is safe. It's usually quite a chunky part of the capital stack. And there's a pretty good chance that they get their money back on that because of the loan to value ratios. I'm going to use another another term here. If you're gearing at appropriate LVRs, then there's a good chance you'll get that money back.
Yeah. Okay. So the banks are taking the banks are taking that risk. Does every single deal have these 4 types of debt in them? Or
no, not necessarily. Capital? So let's take a simple property purchase, right? 3-bedroom house. It's $1 million. The bank will lend you 80% of that as senior debt down the bottom, and you're putting in 20% for the deposit, 5% for closing costs, and that's common equity. I mean, that's probably the most common way that a deal is structured. But you can get more creative than that. You can issue things like preferred equity, where it's not quite the last out; it's out before the common equity. So there's essentially less risk compared to common equity. You can also staple it to a coupon, for example, where it pays an annual rate. And then there's mezzanine debt. So it's debt like you're borrowing, but it's at a mezzanine level, so just above the senior and just after the preferred equity. So it's called mezzanine because it's kind of bridging the gap between the equity and the debt space. And then
do people deliberately get mezzanine debt, or is it one of these things that just you accidentally go over $100,000 and you need money right now, so you have to pay that extra? You have to pay that extra capital, or do people deliberately go out there to get mezzanine finance as a part of their, the part of the deal?
Yeah, no, I mean, like as a developer, you try and avoid, but if you need to get the deal over the line, to finish up the last finishings and bits and pieces, that's what you need to
well,
do.
Yeah,
right?
your deal's a perfect example of this, right? We're going through COVID. You think you're going to have a 20% return in a simple 1 into 3 subdivision, and then all of a sudden COVID hits, and then timeframes blow out by, I don't know, 6 months, 12 months. You're not going to have, if you are floating by as if this is your first 1 into 3, you're not going to have $100,000 to just sit there. But you're going to get the money. It's going to happen. You're going to get this 30% return, but someone needs to give the builder his paycheck and pay the Sparky and pay everybody. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly right. So on the whole scheme of things, if you're making 30+% on a development and you're paying a couple of percentage points on mezzanine debt, well, you do it any day of the week to get the deal across the line, and that's sometimes what it takes. It's one of those things where you may not want to use, but sometimes you just need to use it. For example.
Yeah, it's one of those things like embrace it when you have to, avoid it if you can, right? Like if you got to use it, LMI. You got to use it. Yeah, yeah, exactly like LMI. Okay, so one of the things that you've mentioned here as well is 7 tips for a successful loan application. Wow. Okay, can we talk because I feel like we've been hinting upon what a crowd property is, but I feel like it's now gotten to a point of I'm a little bit confused about what it is. So let's just talk about what crowd property is and how it works, and then maybe we can talk about the loan approval and stuff like that, and then it will make a bit more sense. Because I think you guys play in a bit of an interesting space that not a lot of people know about, but could use.
So I mean, it's very simple. We're an online tech platform, and we do one thing, and we do one thing very well, which is to connect property developers who need money for their projects with everyday investors who want a return on their money. We're cutting out all of the people in the middle, like brokers, some financial advisors, for example, and we're making it direct access in the middle for investors to invest money onto the platform, for us to lend out to property developers. Now, we recognize that your average everyday investor is not going to have the time or perhaps the expertise to do the due diligence that we do. So part of our service is to make sure that the projects that go onto the platform are qualified, are well curated, have the right amount of equity in the deal, are well due diligence through our 57 steps. And are the right product for the area, and so on and so forth. So we really do all of that hard work to make sure that the projects really stack up and we've got the right people running the project. For the developer, it's about understanding and getting to know what you're trying to do, right? Like one of the things that I face as a property developer when I go out to get finance for my own projects is that the banks just don't get it. Like they're lending to for farm equipment, for photocopiers and so on and so forth, but they don't really get what it's involved in a construction project. So for part of what we do and our wider team, all of us have a property background. All of us have a whether it's Alan, who's an architect, or Jack, who's done property sales, or whether it's Peter, who's recently joined the team and he's done property development credit for a long time. Like they're intimately involved in property projects and property in general. So that expertise really counts for us to understand or to help people understand their project and to really get what property developers want when it comes to finance.
So when it becomes one of these more difficult to understand from the bank's perspective type of deals, like a boarding house, a HMO, co-living, bridging finance, like we were talking about before, modular development finance, that would be incredibly interesting. I'd hate to, as soon as you start mentioning a trust to a bank, they lose their mind. I can't imagine what it would happen when you talk about a modular development.
Yeah, we've funded a few of these in the UK, and look, they've worked really well. You get them up in a matter of weeks, all prefabbed, pre-manufactured, and it just works, right? And the key thing with doing more of these is not enough financiers understanding it to be able to get projects off the ground. So we're very proud of that. The one section in that last slide was the bottom right-hand corner, which is special situations, which is basically anything that doesn't fit into those categories. So if you've got a special situation, come talk to us. If it's a complex joint venture partnership, if it's an SDA or an NDIS project, if you've got development exit, if you've got multiple securities, like we've basically either done them or seen them in the past. So we're very happy to have that conversation.
I can't, and this is not a paid sponsorship by any means or stretch of the imagination, but we don't do that. But I like the fact that you're held accountable on this side for the deal side of things. So you're trying to find someone to help them get that development. And then the investors are on the other side as well. And you've got to kind of make everyone, you're held accountable because that side has to be good. This side has to be good. And they have to meet in the middle and get a good deal. So yeah.
It's kind of like the buyer's agents of development finance show, kind of.
Well, the beautiful thing about
no, I mean, it's about finding, because if the deal doesn't stack up, then you can't present that to your investor client. So the deal has to stack up, and you have to make it work. Otherwise, the investors are going to be pissed off, and the investors need to get a return. So the deal needs to work. So I like it.
Exactly.
I'll take two.
How if somebody were, how long does it take for a typical sort of fairly standard development to get approved if it stacks up on your platform?
Yeah, normally we're looking at, to get an initial decision from us, they submit the project with some basic numbers and information memorandum, and we can generally turn that around in about 72 hours as a early indicative.
Wow.
Now that's pretty fast, right? And it doesn't cost anything to do that. You can just flick us an email with the project and we can get that back to you fairly quickly. But what's also interesting is from application to settlement, we're looking at, sort of 6, 8, maybe 8 weeks. Now, typically when you're looking at bank finance, you're talking, 6 months from when you apply. And I've personally experienced this, which is just frustrating. You're banging your head against the wall and it's just not fun. And particularly when you're trying to scale up and you've got multiple projects on the run, you go, here we go again, right?
Well, the other challenge and that you'll probably a lot of investors, a lot of developers may find is that once you go to a bank with a project under sort of 2 or 3 million, which I'm sure is quite a niche space, they just don't want to know about it because there's not enough margin, not enough fat in the deal for them to do it, because they know if you're a developer, you're potentially going to sell it, and then they're not gaining the interest. So for them to give you a loan at 4 or 5% or 6% or whatever it is, they're like, well, where are they making their money on that? So
yeah,
exactly right. The banks, I mean, the unwritten thing is that you've almost to get funding for projects. What the banks are looking for is the 25, 30-year loan, right, to lend to you, which is fine. But that's their kettle of fish. And whereas for us, the projects, we love projects that are, that 6 to 18 month time frame. So that's what we find, 6 months for a bridging loan, for example, or a quick reno, 18 months for a development project. And our investors like that too, because they can invest, put their money in there, wait for the project to complete, and they can then decide what to do with their money. It's not tied in for a long period of time.
Love that. I am just cautious of time. We've got about 10 minutes before we have to wrap this one up. So anyone that has any questions, Daniel has a vast amount of experience in these developments. You go through pretty much every deal that actually makes it to a certain stage, I imagine, Daniel, where you're dealing with the creme de la creme. And I imagine you have a lot of insight into what are some of the commonalities between an amazing deal versus a junky, crappy one?
Yeah.
What do you see?
Yeah. What are we seeing, right? I mean, this is some people ask me, what makes a deal a good deal, and I'll steal something from one of my mentors who've always taught me in the last sort of 15 years or so, and they've said, look, for a good property development, you just buy well, right? Make sure you buy the right property at the right price, and you guys will know this, right? Because if you buy well, then chances are it'll probably stack up, and if it stacks up, then you'll probably be able to sell it at a reasonable price, and you'll be able to pay the builder for a reasonable price for the build, and you'll be able to get finance for it. You'll get investors for it. It snowballs in a positive manner. But if you don't buy well, it snowballs in the other way. It's the, what do you call it? The non-virtuous circle, right? So that's one of the things that I've always looked at is to buy well, and I've taken that to heart, despite very early stumbles, as you've seen in my very first deal. I've sort of taken that on as a mantra to move forward. And to what you said earlier, Joe, it's sometimes the deals that you don't do that really are good decisions as well.
Yeah.
It's like the only take the John West, only take the best, reject the rest. I don't know if that sounds catchy. I want to know what are some of the, and I think we've had some comments, so there might be questions. There was an interesting one from Brian, but I want to know what are some of the key things that a lot of people tend to overlook with property developments?
Yeah, that's a very good one. What are the common pitfalls of developments, right? I mean, there's quite a few, but some of the most common ones that are over easily looked are just, I mean, we've talked about this, product market fit, right? Make sure what you're building, before you worry about the finishes, before you worry about the design, be in the shoes of your end customer. So the classic, Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind, right? And this is perfect for property development. Make sure you've got a picture of what it looks like at the end and slowly work towards that. A lot of people go, okay, well, my next step is to get planning approval. My next step is then to tender out for the build. My next step is then to subdivide, quickly losing sight of what the product looks like at the back end. The second thing is probably finance. Like, that gets very overlooked. And probably like,
it adds so much expense. If you're not doing it correctly, it's like a percentage point is thousands of dollars. So don't mess that up.
Exactly.
Sorry,
We encourage people to, no, it's exactly the point. We encourage people to talk to us early, even before they've secured the deal, and say, hey, look, Daniel and the team, what do you think of this development? Have you seen this before? And if it's a good deal, we'll tell you. There's no charge to do that. If it's a crap deal, we'll tell you too, right? So it avoids the developer putting hundreds of thousands, if not millions, to make less money. We want to see developers succeed, and we want investors who invest on our platform to get their money and interest back as well, so they can go again for the next project.
I love that. One thing that I think that would like to cover off is that you talk about, like, we've talked a lot about the development side of things. Let's just say you're an investor, but you don't have $100,000, $200,000 to do your own development. What's the investor side? Let's talk to the investor side so we can cover that off. We've got some lovely lady here with a mobile phone. What does the investor side look like for some of the returns that you can get? Because that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in, how do I get my money?
Yeah. So it's important to distinguish retail versus wholesale investors, right? So we've had a track record of being in Australia for a year and a half, and then 8 years prior to that in the UK. So wholesale investors are those who earn over $250,000 a year, have over 2.5 million in net assets, or can invest $500,000 in one go. Now that's not everybody. That's a select group of people. What we've done is we've democratized this sort of property club that are usually exclusive to those who have high net wealth and high incomes, right? We've made it compliant through years of hard work, so that anyone can invest into property projects. And that's from as little as $2,500. You can put it into a first mortgage backed project. We do all of the due diligence. We fund only about 4% of projects that are put in front of us. So we eliminate a lot of them before they make it to the next step. We do all of that DD for you. We only lend up to 70% loan to value ratio. So the market has to go backwards for an insane amount before it affects your capital interest. And the great thing is that track record in the UK, we've been going for, like I said, eight and a half, almost 9 years now. And we've had 100% payback on capital and interest. And that's over $500 million worth of lending. And so far we've been blessed with the fact that we were able to pay back every single cent of that, both in capital and interest. And we've continued that track record in the last sort of year and a half that we've launched here in Australia. So we, touch wood, want to keep that record going. But it also comes back to the level of due diligence that we do, and also just the type of product. Like it is a first mortgage product, so you're in last, you're out first. And these are just some stats over the last over the last 8.5 years. We've funded $1.2 billion worth of property, 3,000 homes, 530 million amount lent. So we've done this a few times before, right? So we want to open this up to the wider public. We want to make sure that it's available for everybody. So for those who, and again, this is not advice, but if you had some money and you wanted a return from that money and to invest into property loans with us, we are happy to have you there.
Well, it's super interesting, and obviously not financial advice, but when I was building my deposit, I was looking at all these alternative things to do, like Didn't
you do the vans, Joe? Did you do the vans, or?
I did. Yeah, I built a little van business, a little van empire. Yeah, yeah. But like, do anything you can to get the capital going, like to keep that money flowing until you have enough of a nest egg to be. I imagine the better side is the other side of your of the business, where you've got the development and you're the developer, and then you're calling upon Crowd Property to say, "Hey guys, I've got a cracker for you. Get your investors on board, and we can sort them out." No, but it sounds like both sides are great, but use them. They're there for a certain type of person that has certain type of things and requirements. So yeah, for me, it was how do I make as much money as possible, as quickly as possible, to get me to my deposit, to be allowing me to get to that point. I like it.
Be cautious of crypto, Joe. Be cautious.
I didn't. Well, okay, I did buy $5,000 worth of Luna that went to zero, and I was very upset about that.
But yeah, this is an interesting one. I want to guess. I love the questions that Brian asks. He absolutely nails some of the questions he sent through. So he said, because I think this is interesting as well. What needs to change in Greater Sydney, Melbourne for a simple demo and build 1 into 2 to work? Or I'll even ask it a different way. Does it? Or another part of the question is, does it work now, or are we just looking in the wrong spot?
Yeah, it's the $1 million question, right?
Probably $2 million in Sydney, but yeah.
You're probably right. 2.5 as we speak. Look, there are suburbs around Sydney where probably in the last sort of 6 to 12 months where traditionally numbers haven't really stacked are starting to stack now. And that's due to the fact that despite high interest rate, despite high build costs, if you're buying the right product in the right area, it certainly could be stacking up now because your entry price is much lower now compared to what it was 12, 18 months ago. Melbourne, very similar scenario where deals are starting to stack up now where it didn't before. Suburbs differ. And if one suburb doesn't work, well, don't do anything in that suburb. Go look at the next suburb. And different suburbs have different characteristics and performance criteria and different price points that could work. So I think. So
what suburbs in Sydney are working, like are starting to work?
So I want to ask the other question. How do I find I want to know the criteria, because if I know the criteria, regardless of the suburbs, is that the 57 points I need to know?
So look, it's a very simple formula, right? Like what's the fixed amounts in a project, right? Your construction costs are fixed, right? Your end sales values are basically fixed. So it's really a question of what you buy land for and where. So if you can look at a suburb where land is a certain percentage of the end sales values, then you've got a good chance of making it stack up. But to answer Brian's question, I think, and this is my personal opinion, not Crowd Property's opinion, just probably we need more land. Really, we need land available for development. We need probably zoning changes to allow for development. But I'm probably speaking out of my depth here.
Yeah, they're not making any more land.
Definitely,
they're not doing that.
Well, it's interesting because that's what Redham sort of a couple of weeks ago he was talking about, sort of looking at anticipatory zoning changes and sort of saying, well, if that zoning is going to change, then potentially that's where a simple demo and build 1 into 2, or maybe it needs to be 1 into 3. But at the moment, it's not currently zoned that. That's kind of where it potentially can work. But you really need to look into the LEP, local land environmental planning, and all that sort of stuff to understand. You need to know what you're looking at, really.
Exactly, and it's worthwhile once you find that suburb, Brian, that stacks up for you.
Keep it to yourself.
So
others people aren't going to buy it as well.
I mean, there's so many houses in a suburb, right? You can't do every deal out there. So I'm a big believer there's plenty of fish in the sea for everyone. But
agreed.
You're an area expert. Like if you find a suburb that works, know the good streets versus the bad streets. Do your due diligence on where the high sales are versus low sales, what it is you need to build, what's the product, what are the recent sales. Become an area expert, and then that hopefully gets you closer to being a good developer in that area.
Yeah, that stacks up. That's a good FISO, that. Yeah, I love that. Well, are there any, where are you seeing some good value developments around? Like, are there, actually, let me rephrase that question. So I imagine a lot of the people in our group are like 1 into 3, 1 into 5, like, that type of thing. Where are you seeing the most value for bang for buck, or where are you seeing the most amount of those developments without giving away, any personal data? But where are some of the locations that have the best smaller scale developments at the moment?
I mean, I may be biased, but we see a lot of deals everywhere. Like, there's
that's the worst answer ever.
Yeah, like there are suburbs that just work really well. a lot of it is just doing enough feasibilities, right? Like, I spoke about doing 100 feasibilities and nothing stacking up. Well, it could be the 101 feasibility that does. But if you've done feasos for a couple of weeks and it doesn't work, go fish in a different pond, which is what I did. We're down to Adelaide, and what is it, 3 out of 10 stacked up there. And so I thought, okay, well, let me go do that. My feel is that coming back to areas that have been sort of suppressed in price, like Sydney and Melbourne, I feel it's probably time now. I'm not sure if you guys agree. It's where deals are done. It's where properties are stacking up again, where in the last 12, 18 months it really didn't, because you could buy anything unless it was cash and conditional 30 day settlement, right? Remember those times? So I think
they're in different parts of the country now.
Like WA, Jesus.
Yeah, WA is a tight market, but does it mean, like, when do you hit the peak, like the bottom, right? Where do you want to buy on the graph? What's the best point to be buying, and when's the best point to be selling? But that's also one other thing about the end sale value. You need to make sure that it's realistic, right? Like, you can't just say, I believe that the market's moving so fast, it's going to be worth 20% more, and that's the only justification you have for your feasibility to stack up. Move on. The deal doesn't make sense. Just move on.
Yeah, because I find a lot of, and I'm sure you see this like every minute of the day. You see a developer or who it is, like mostly the ones who may have not done many deals, but they try and sort of they massage the numbers to make it work, and they're trying to convince themselves into the deal, and they make it, and that's potentially where you get yourself into trouble.
Yeah. You can't account for that. that there's going to be a 20% price rise in property by the time you finish your development. You simply can't account for that. We do all of our feasibilities on today's dollars, and any movement to the upside is a bonus. Any movement to the downside is eating away at your profit, and that's how we sort of need to be cynically, unfortunately, thinking about these things. But if you're an investor and you go, well, all of this is too bloody hard, like how do you invest into project loans without doing all of the due diligence, without, like, you might have full-time jobs, you might just like property but not love property like we do, right? So
so how can people learn more about crowd property? I feel like this is an ad. I feel like this is an ad. This is not an ad, everyone. It's just a very well put together slideshow that flows perfectly into every conversation that we're having here. So well done, Daniel, on your bloody presentation. But how can people learn more about what you do, mate? Because it sounds very, very interesting.
So you can simply register to invest. So take out your phones. Thanks to the pandemic, we now know how to use our phones to scan QR codes now. So
just download the app.
If you want to scan it, you can do so now, or just go to crowdproperty.com.au/investors, register on the platform. I think there's a couple of deals that are live and being funded right now as we speak, so that you can take a look at some of those and see whether you fancy them. Somebody asked what the rate is. We're sitting at around like that 8.5% per annum return. I have to say targeted return there. So if it goes to plan and you get paid back that, it's 100% of your capital plus the 8.5% per annum that you're getting in interest as well. It does get paid at the end of the project when they sell or refinance the project. But yeah, 8.5% is the going rate at the moment.
I love that Brian said Clayton's ad. I had to Google it, and it's an ad from the 80s about Clayton's ad it looks like a gin or something, or like a whiskey. Yeah, it's a whiskey. Jeez, there you go. How
there you go.
Brian's a source of, but yeah, sorry to take it away from crowd property. I just had to. When I see something, I need to know what it is and what it all means. What does it mean? Tell me what it means.
Well, I feel like we've had a great run through of what crowd property is and the development process. I think it's a systemized process that you need to just follow every single time. No matter what the deal is, you have to follow the same kind of process that's suitable for that deal. And you've gone well into detail on it, Daniel. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I suppose for me, the thing that I've really taken out from the session is if you're going to be a developer, you're going to need to understand all the aspects of the deal. Well, not all the aspects, but I suppose understand the high level and make sure you've got very good answers for all these things prepared. Whether you go to somebody like a crowd property, whether you go to even a private funder, they're going to ask, or even a bank, they're going to ask these questions like, how are you sort of getting the approvals across the line? What are you planning to build? Why does that make sense for that area? So you need to have the answers to these couple of questions. And if you haven't, and what are the comparable end sales? If you don't have those things, and I think you need to go back to the drawing board and sort of fill in some of the dots before you start developing.
Love it. Anything else you wanted to chat through, Daniel, before we wrap this thing up?
No, I think we've chatted through, my journey, what crowd property does, and shared some hopefully useful stories and had a bit of fun, right? So it's been quite a ride. I really enjoyed it. I hope it was enjoyable for everyone. And look forward to chatting to people about property developments and or funding moving forward. So no, thank you so much for having me on.
You took it down as I was taking it up. I know.
A lot of people saying nice things.
Yeah. And talking about an alcohol from the 80s. So no, thank you very much for. I remember we chatted. I think it was in March 2020. We maybe chatted before then. You had a meet up in the city, in about maybe 2017, maybe in a bit earlier than that. So I've known you now for probably at least 7 or 8 years, Dan. Or Daniel. So maybe longer than actually.
Like yesterday.
I know. That was at the city RSL or something. I think something like up there. So
that's
when I used to work. Yeah, the meetup used to run.
Too cute. You guys are too cute. Wonderful session, mate. Thank you very much, Daniel. Let's go buy a development property. We'll catch you guys later. See you guys.
Thanks so much.